Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Beauty History. I am your host, Allison Chase, but my friends call me Allie. So for today's video, we are going to talk about the life of Gianni Versace. But before we go any further, let's take a second to grab our iced coffee or a hot coffee. Let's take a sip and let's get started. Now, I must preface this video by stating that there will be a lot of Italian names. I do not speak Italian, but I will do my best with the proper pronunciation. So when I think of Gianni Versace, I definitely think of bold, bright, fun looks. So I decided to go with something a bit more bold today, and I think I will also create something very bold for the eye look as well. And I'm going to go ahead and start off with my Chanel Les Neuf Ombres eyeshadow palette in number 1 Affresco. So Giovanni Maria Versace was born on December 2nd in 1946. He was born in Reggio Calabria. This is part of the toe. If you imagine the boot of Italy, it's on the toe part. This region has actually been greatly influenced by ancient Greek art, ancient Greek languages as well. Gianni had a brother named Santo. He had a sister named Donatella, as well as a second sister named Tina. Now, unfortunately, Tina actually passed away at a very young age, at the age of 12. This was from complications from a tetanus infection. You know, medicine in the 1940s was not what it is today. So unfortunately, she died at a young age. His father worked and owned a hardware store, and his mother was a dressmaker. And her seamstress business actually did quite well for itself. So from a young age, Gianni was very close to his mother. He was definitely a mama's boy. We've seen a few of these on this beauty history series, but he was very close to her. He loved her tremendously, and he wasn't very close with his father at all. His father just was closer to his other two children that survived. So growing up in Calabria was not really easy for Gianni. He was gay, he was effeminate, he had this high-pitched falsetto voice. He stood out. He did not seem like the macho type of man. And we have to remember that when he was born in Italy, it was still a very Catholic place. You know, Catholic ideas, Catholic ideologies, they basically ruled people's way of life. Like everything you can imagine was ruled by the Catholic Church. So ideologies about homosexuality also prevailed. So school was not really a fun time for Gianni. He was bullied and teased for being effeminate and having this high-pitched voice. He was teased by not only his schoolmates, but also sometimes teachers, which is quite something. So, like many sensitive, creative types, he just withdrew and just became very inward. Like he spent a lot of time by himself. He spent a lot of time in his head creating fantasy worlds. You know, just being sensitive and creative made him very different for his time. And he was very influenced by the ancient Greek statues, ancient Greek art that surrounded Calabria that had an impact on his life early on, but also later as well. And so since his sister Donatella was several years younger than he was often responsible for babysitting her. And so one day he decided to take them to the Roman Colosseum. And this is where Gianni would become face to face with this Medusa statue. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Medusa, this mythological Greek monster who has snakes for hair. But there was something about this that just captivated him completely. So at this time, Gianni was studying Greek in school, so he decided to delve into the mythology of Medusa. And I'm going to go ahead and share with you the original story of Medusa. So as I have mentioned, you've all heard of this ancient mythological monster with snakes for hair and who can turn any man into stone by looking at him. Now, the real story behind Medusa is she was born a human woman. She was mortal, and she was working at the temple of Athena, the goddess Athena. She was working there as a priestess. Now, these priestesses had to take a vow of chastity, so she had to remain a virgin and she had to dress in very modest clothing. And even with all of this, Medusa was a very beautiful young woman. She was very charming and she was just very beautiful. So Athena was quite jealous of her. And the god Poseidon, the god of the sea, wanted Medusa. He thought she was beautiful and he wanted her for himself. So one day, Medusa is minding her own business. She is walking by the seashore, and Poseidon comes from the sea, kidnaps Medusa. He sexually assaults her and throws her back onto the shore. Now, when Medusa comes back to the temple of the goddess Athena, Athena sees this and gets mad at Medusa and decides to punish Medusa by turning her into this monster with snakes for hair, and who will now turn any man into stone by looking at her. So in Athena's eyes, the next time Medusa wants to have a partner or a boyfriend, he will be turned into stone, and so she will be alone forever. I could not make this up if I wanted to. Upon learning this whole story, Gianni was just mesmerized by this mythological creature, this woman, just everything about her, because if you look at ancient Greek art depicting Medusa, she actually is wearing very little clothing because Medusa can turn any man into stone. So she doesn't have to worry about being modest or covering up her body. She can walk around practically naked, and she doesn't have to be concerned about being attacked because she could just stare at them and turn them into stone. And so Gianni would go on to sketch Medusa, or like basically any sketch that he did, he had Medusa in mind, and he would draw her very scantily clad, very revealed, because he liked this idea, this symbol of this strong woman who wore whatever she wanted and didn't have to worry about unwanted male attention. And Medusa was so impactful on Gianni that the Versace logo is actually the Medusa head. Like if you look at the Versace logo, it's actually just a Medusa. Something interesting I found out is that Gianni actually had this inclination towards music, which was not very well received. His family was in the dressmaking business, so he might have been a great composer in a different family, but in this one he became a fashion designer. So Gianni decided to start working for his mother as an apprentice, and she had a shop that was doing very well for itself, but she definitely had older clientele, like clients her own age. And so when Gianni came in, he just attracted this entire new world, new clientele. He was dressing women differently. And one of the clients that he attracted was Miss Italy of 1962. And so from a very early age, Gianni understood the connection between business and celebrity. Like he put the two and two together. He realized that Miss Italy was a local celebrity. So if she walked around wearing his designs, that would be great for him and also great for her as well. So a few years after working for his mother, he decided to move to Milan. I mean, Milan is a fashion capital. If you are Italian and you live in Italy and you want to work in fashion, why wouldn't you move to Milan? So he did. And he actually started working for a company called Jenny's. Jenny's was an Italian ready-to-wear manufacturer, and he actually created a couple lines for them that were quite bold and experimental, but were received very well. So he worked for this company for a few years, but then he eventually decided to take the ultimate plunge and open up his own boutique. He opened up his first boutique in Milan in 1978 on Via della Spiga, which is a very famous street in Milan. It's where all the shopping happens. It's where all of the fancy high-end boutiques and restaurants and cafes are. So if you're going to open up an upscale boutique, you do it on Via della Spiga. So I'm going to go into a bit of foundation. This is my Chanel Ultra Le Teint in B30. So upon opening his salon, it started going really well. It was very well received. Like, he started getting international praise for his designs quite quickly. And he actually made this business, made the Versace fashion house into a family affair. So his brother Santo actually became the president of the company, and his sister Donatella became the vice president and also muse. She had been his muse for quite a few years because, as I mentioned, she was several years younger than Gianni. So he would often ask her, you know, what's trendy? What do you think is sexy? What do you think is nice and fashionable? Because he wanted that younger clientele. So he would ask her opinion on designs and sketches. Now I'm going into a bit of concealer. This is my Clé de Peau concealer in the shade Almond. And one thing was clear about Versace. This was overtly sexual. There was nothing shy, nothing modest, nothing timid about Versace designs. It was in your face, bold, bright, overtly sexual. Gianni himself was once quoted as saying that he did not believe in good taste, which I thought was quite funny. And during this time, he actually would become great rivals with Giorgio Armani, which I'm sure you guys all know of. And these two were contemporaries, and they were each other's biggest rivals at the time. And I think one quote which perfectly encapsulates this rivalry and this comparison is that Armani dresses the wife while Versace dresses the mistress. And I think this is just perfect. I mean, wow. One thing was certain, that Gianni really resented that at some point in fashion history, we decided that in order for a man to be dressed professionally, he had to wear a suit and tie, and women had to cover themselves very modestly, or else they would be judged. And he hated this. He wanted men to be able, whatever they wanted, jeans, t-shirts, less clothing if they wanted to. And the same for women. He didn't like the fact that if a woman was very confident in her body, that if she wore very revealing clothing, that she would be judged and called names. He really resented that. So by this point, the Versace aesthetic was well established. The bright, bold colors, the bold prints, and sexy cutouts, that was Versace. But he actually created this dress in, I think, 1982, which was this very tight, very form-fitting chainmail dress. The fabric was called Oraton. And you might not know this name in particular, but I think you've definitely seen it. You've seen it on red carpets, you've seen it in fashion shows. It's this very thin, form-fitting, very fine chainmail dress. And this is quintessential Versace. The next time there's a red carpet and you see anyone wearing this, you'll know it's Versace. As we mentioned before, Gianni was from southern Italy. He was very proud of this. He was very proud of his Greco-Roman roots, and he used the Medusa in his logo, but he also used the Greek key in a lot of his fashion, his jewelry. You can see this Greek key pattern all over the place. And it was actually in 1982 that Gianni met the male model Antonio D'Amico, and the two would actually have a long-term relationship that lasted 15 years up until Gianni's death. Unfortunately, at the time, there was no such thing as same-sex marriage, so the two were not able to officially get married, but they were together for 15 years. They were in a long-term partnership. They had a lot in common. They both loved shopping, and they both loved antiques and art, and they would shop and spend a lot of time traveling the world just to discover new collectibles to find to decorate their homes. I'm going to go into a bit of bronzer. This is my Chanel Le Beige Healthy Glow Cream Bronzer. So in 1982, Gianni also decided to expand his brand. He essentially wanted his name and his logo on anything you can think of. Housewares, china, perfume. He wanted the Medusa and Versace name on everything. I think the entire Versace aesthetic is very over the top. It's exaggerated, it's extravagant, it's in your face, it is money, but it screams money. Like, it's not a type of wealth that wants you to guess whether or not it has wealth. It's a type of money that wants you to know it has money, if that makes any sense. And I think Versace wanted to share that with other people. Like, he wanted this sense of royalty and regalness to be available to the masses. So if you bought a Versace coffee cup, you would be able to have your coffee like a king or a queen. Because to me, when I look at the Versace aesthetic, it reminds me of kings and queens of old. It reminds me of Versailles. It reminds me of Louis XIV, the Sun King, you know? It's exaggerated, extravagant wealth, and that's what it makes me think of. So for the blush and highlight, I'm going into my new Chantecaile palette here. This is the Manta Ray Coral blush and highlighter. So early on, Gianni had learned the importance of using celebrity to sell his clothing, but now that he was an established international fashion house, he used this even more. He would get celebrities to come to his fashion shows. Normally, designers would invite, editors or journalists to come see their shows, and maybe one or two celebrities that they were friends with, but Gianni decided to pack his shows with as many celebrities as he could invite, and he made sure to hire the top supermodels at the time. So his shows would have Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, and these women were very expensive. Most of them didn't get out of bed for less than $10,000 a day, and most designers wouldn't afford to hire every single one of these top supermodels for one show. But Gianni, he would invest. He would blow his budget on inviting all of these women to come to his shows and to walk in the shows. And so that way, the press, the paparazzi, whoever, would come to see his designs, but also they would come to see who was sitting in the seats, which celebrities, which singers, which actors, and they want to see which supermodels were going to be in this show today. And some people even credit Gianni with the new wave of supermodels because they kind of went hand in hand, supermodels with Gianni. He sort of helped perpetuate this idea of this like mythological supermodel Amazon woman. They were great for his fashion shows, but also his fashion shows were great for their careers. And he would constantly use them in rotation with his shows and with his ad campaigns as well as using famous supermodels with famous celebrities in some of his ad campaigns too. By the 90s, Gianni was almost as famous as some of his clients. He was dressing Elton John, Tupac Shakur, Madonna, so he was quite something. So in 1991, Gianni and Antonio went on vacation and they were planning on going to Cuba, but on their way there, they actually had a layover in Miami and they had a few hours, so they decided to let the driver drive them around Miami, see what the fuss is about, and just have a look around. Up until now, Gianni and Antonio were still living in Italy, and they were basically living an open secret. Like, their friends and family knew that they were gay, but Italy was still very conservative, very Catholic ideologies about gay marriage or gay people in general was still very prevalent in everyday life. So they basically lived in open secret. As they were being driven through Miami, they were captivated. Gianni had never seen so many bright lights, so many flashing neon signs. People there just seemed so much less inhibited, less uptight, more open. There was an open gay scene in Miami. He saw men holding hands with men, women holding hands with women. People there just seemed more free and more open, and also the beach reminded him of his roots in the Mediterranean. So they decided that they were going to stay in Miami, and they decided to buy property there as well. Gianni's aesthetic is bold and exaggerated and extravagant, but it's also very young and youthful. And I think Miami and Miami Beach is very youthful, and people are on the beach, so they're wearing bathing suits, they're not wearing as much clothing, they're wearing bright neon bathing suits, you know, all of that combined just screamed home to Gianni and Antonio. So in 1993, they ended up buying a huge estate on actually one of the main streets in the tourist district. This was Villa Casa Casarino, and it was actually just on the street. There was a gate to get inside the home, but you know, anyone could walk on this street. It was in the tourist area. It was very open. It was very free. I'm gonna go ahead and just finish up my eyes right here. I'm gonna use this Gucci mascara in black, and I have this liner here from Chanel. It's the Cils aux Yeux Waterproof number 946 Intense Teal. And I'm gonna go ahead and use this gold shade on the inner corner of my eye here. And for the lips, I'm going to finish it off with this Lisa Eldridge in Velvet Fawn. So Antonio and Gianni transplant into Miami culture, and even though Gianni was fabulously rich and very famous by this point, he was still unpretentious and down to earth. There were many other celebrities on Miami Beach who would come and visit or who lived there, and they would walk around with bodyguards, but Gianni didn't see the need for it. He was part of Miami culture. He was nicknamed the mayor of Miami Beach because he and Antonio were just everywhere all the time. They were known by name at their favorite cafes, their favorite restaurants, their favorite bars. They were just they were fixtures of Miami culture, Miami City. They were just always around. They were prominent members of society, and Gianni was always known for being very kind, very hospitable, just being a really nice guy. He never thought of himself as better than anyone else. He never thought that he was more important than anyone else. Even though he was crazy rich and famous, he just thought he was a regular guy like everyone else. And he and Antonio were able to enjoy this freedom as a couple in Miami Beach because there was an open gay culture there. They could walk around holding hands. They could be a couple in public and not have to worry about scrutiny or having people say or whisper certain things. And I just want to point out that in 1994, one of Gianni's dresses became that dress. So in 1994, there was an up-and-coming starlet named Elizabeth Hurley who was attending a movie premiere for Weddings and a Funeral. And she showed up late wearing this black Versace gown that was cut out everywhere. The cutouts were very strategic, but where they were placed, it looked as though she wasn't able to wear underwear with the dress, and it also looked as though it was held together with these golden safety pins, and it was just so shocking. I mean, I think that Elizabeth Hurley looks amazing in this dress. She looks fantastic, but I can also see why it would cause a few eyebrows because it was so sexy, it was so bold, it was so Versace. So that dress definitely helped her career a lot. And it was actually in 1995 that Gianni actually had his public coming out. By this point, he and Antonio had been together for over a decade, and his friends and family knew, but he decided to have an official coming out in the Advocate, which is an LGBTQ plus magazine. And this was something that he had contemplated doing for a really long time, but he wasn't sure because the 90s were not really an open and accepting time for gay people. There was still the panic and hysteria from HIV during the 80s, and so it was really a gamble for him and a gamble for his company and his career to come out, but he did. And he officially claimed that he was gay and that Antonio was his partner. Unfortunately, his coming out did affect the sales afterwards a little bit, but it didn't affect the company as a whole. So Gianni was open and comfortable in Miami. This was his home. He was the mayor of Miami. He would walk out on the street. He talked to people when they would come up to him because they recognized him for being an international fashion icon. But, you know, he was really friendly. He would wave, he would say hi, he would shake hands, etc. And he would go out and go to cafes and go to the newspaper stands. He would do all that. by himself. He didn't feel the need to have security with him. He was home and he was comfortable. Gianni would often go and get the morning coffees for him and Antonio. He would often stop by different newspaper stands because in 1997, people didn't have internet like we do today. So he would stop and get the newspapers for them to read in the morning, and he would stop by a specific one because they were both Italian and he wanted to get newspapers from all over the world. He wanted to read about international affairs and read about what was going on back in Italy. So on July 15th, 1997, Gianni goes out. It's a regular morning. It's beautiful out. He's saying hi to the neighbors, saying hi to whoever. He stops by his local coffee shop, picks up the coffees. He goes to the newsstand, says hello to people, keeps talking, gets the newspapers, and then he goes home. And now, as I mentioned, his home was on a busy street, but there was a gate. So he would unlock the gate, go into the courtyard, and there was his mansion. But anyone could have access to this gate. It was public property. So Gianni walks back home. He has his coffees and his newspapers in his arms. He's fiddling with a key, and someone walks up to him. And before he can really turn around, this person shoots him twice in the head. The second bullet actually pierced through his ear and actually pierced through his body and shot a dove that was flying above. Antonio was at home waiting for Gianni to return with their morning coffees when he heard both gunshots. Gianni was rushed to the hospital immediately, but unfortunately was pronounced dead. And this was devastating for Antonio. This was his life partner. Gianni was only 50 years old. He wasn't an old man. And it's actually stated that Gianni actually had an inner ear cancer that he had successfully fought. He was in remission for 6 months before he was shot dead. Since Gianni and Antonio were not officially married, there were issues after his death. In Gianni, he had made it very clear in his will what Antonio would get as his life partner, the homes or the money. He stipulated that Antonio should get a monthly allowance from the Versace company, and that Antonio should also be able to live in whatever home he wanted to that Gianni owned. However, Antonio and Donatella did not get along for whatever reason. I don't know. But after Gianni's passing, Donatella was actually in charge of the estate and the will, and she made it very difficult for Antonio to get what Gianni wanted to leave him. Donatella actually said about Antonio that my relationship with Antonio is exactly as it was when Gianni was alive. I respected him as the boyfriend of my brother, but I never liked him as a person, so the relationship stayed the same. Yikes. There was a lot of back and forth with lawyers for many years, and eventually Antonio was able to get a fraction of what Gianni had left him in the will. I think that's quite sad. I mean, I know that sometimes in-laws do not get along, but I think it's quite sad when someone passes away and when there's money involved and people it kind of seems to bring out the worst in people, and it's really sad, especially since Gianni had made it very clear in his will what he wanted. I do want to take a few minutes to talk about the person who assassinated Gianni, because a few years ago there was a television series made. It was an American crime story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace, and in the show they took many liberties and also invented many things. It should be noted that both Antonio and Donatella both greatly disagree with the TV series. Even though they don't like each other, they both agree that the TV series invented certain things. A lot of it isn't reality. They took a lot of liberties with what they did and what they said. And I'd like to take a few minutes to address that. So first of all, the person who killed Gianni was a serial killer. I personally don't want to mention this person by name because I think this person has had enough fame and doesn't deserve any of it. In the TV series, they would heavily imply that the killer and Gianni knew each other and had this sort of past, maybe illicit. However, Antonio has made it very clear that these two people have never met. There are sources that say that Gianni may have met this person prior several years ago, but this was at a nightclub or an event, and I am of the belief that someone like Gianni Versace probably shook hands and met a lot of people in one night every time he went out. Like if he went to a movie, to a theater, to a bar, he probably met a lot of new people every night. That doesn't mean that he actually knew the person well. That doesn't mean that he had any sort of intimate relationship with this person. Also, in the TV series, they also say that Gianni Versace had HIV. Again, both Donatella and Antonio deny this fact. Going back to Gianni's assassin. So in the TV series, they make it seem as though they had this affair or a relationship at least, and that is why Gianni was targeted. But the person who killed Gianni actually killed 4 people prior to killing Gianni. And I've done a lot of research on this person so that you don't have to. And what I've discovered is upsetting for many reasons. First of all, this killer seems to have grown up in a highly dysfunctional home. It seems as though he grew up extremely spoiled. Apparently his parents told him every day how much better he was than everyone else around him. And one thing to highlight all of that is that his parents had a master bedroom, like every household had, and they decided to give the master bedroom to him, to the killer, as a teenager, because he was so special and so much better than everyone else. Also, the killer had siblings as well, but his parents told him like how much better he was than everyone around him. Okay. And the killer for many years would brag about knowing Gianni and said that they were friends, that he knew him, that he had a past with him. But the killer was also known among the few people that he had as friends as being a pathological liar. He would lie about everything. If 2 people asked him the same question, he would give 2 completely different answers. So to string together a story that Gianni and this person had any sort of connection based off of they might have been in the same building one time, and this pathological liar saying they had a past, to me doesn't really stand on solid ground. And we will really never know the truth because Gianni is dead and the killer took his own life instead of dealing with the consequences of his actions. So that is my opinion, and that is why I don't want to mention the killer by name, because there are many very good true crime documentaries about him, into the psychology of this person. It's quite fascinating, but I feel from the research that I've done that this person was extremely narcissistic. And even if I sit here for an hour and tell you why I think he's a bad person, I think that if he were alive today to listen to this, he would get enjoyment from that. And this is a story about Gianni. This is Gianni's life, his legacy, his impact on the world, not about some deranged lunatic. I want to end on one final fact about Versace. Do you guys remember the 2000 Grammy Awards? There was a singer, dancer, actress by the name of Jennifer Lopez in attendance, and she wore this green dress with the most plunging neckline that went down to her belly button. Do you know who designed that dress? It was Versace. It's just so spot on, so bold, so sexy, so extravagant, and so Versace. So I think this about does it for today's video. I know we ended on a bit of a true crime ending, but unfortunately this is Gianni's life, and a lot of mystery still revolves around what happened at the end. But I think it's important to remember who he was as a person, what he did beforehand, and not just his untimely demise. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Thank you all so much for stopping by. I post these beauty history series every now and then. I dive into the history and legacy of different fashion houses. We've covered Christian Dior, Coco Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent. So if you guys are interested in that sort of thing, please subscribe to my channel. I think this is all I have for you guys for today, so thank you all so much for stopping by. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!